Um, so Ambassador Sajdik, first of all, thank you for agreeing to do this interview about the Belarusian presidential elections, which took place yesterday. According to preliminary results, President Lukashenko will stay in office with a majority of 80%. What is your take on the results, your interpretation?
It didn't surprise me. This was to be expected, and I think also the percentage was to be expected. That's the usual. And so I think one could have anticipated such a published result. And we will never know what would have been the real result.
Okay, and one last short question. What would be your prognosis or your, what would you guess that the Western reaction to these results could be to President Lukashenko staying in office for another term?
I would be careful with the term Western, because we should first speak of a possible European reaction,
of course,
possible US reaction. And I don't think that the two reactions necessarily have to be the same. That's why the term Western reaction is, from my point of view, too general. Let's first talk about the possible EU reaction. I think there had been EU reactions already before. Borrell already criticized, I don't know whether I can use the word condemn, but criticized the way of the electoral campaign was held, that candidates were put to jail, that activists were put to jail, that there was also a very specific, if I may say so, possibility of media coverage, and that there are no outside observers to these elections. So this was already said before by Borrell, and I think that was right. What the reaction will be afterwards, I think one has to look at what is in place at the moment, the state of affairs of EU-Belarus relationship. And we have to be very sober when we look at this. As to legal contractual relationship between the European Union and the Republic of Belarus, there is virtually none, because there is no partnership and cooperation agreement between the EU and Belarus. Belarus is the only country where the ratification process of this, of a partnership and cooperation agreement, the only country of the post-Soviet orbit where the ratification process has not been, is not really underway. Even with Turkmenistan, the ratification process by all member countries has come to an end with the ratification, last ratification by the UK. One wouldn't believe it, but really by the UK. And it's now up to the European Parliament to ratify the partnership and cooperation agreement with Turkmenistan. But with Belarus, it's freezed since 1997. So to speak about a possible, putting on hold this, treaty is not possible because there is none. The only relationship that they have at the moment is that Belarus is partner to the is a partner country to the Eastern Partnership of the European Union since 2009. And when they joined this program in 2009, Russia reacted by banning the import of Belarusian milk. So then Belarus blocked the decision-making in if I remember very well, in the SNG, in the Commonwealth of Independent States, and also in the Defense Union. So that's the only type of relationship at the moment between EU and Belarus. There are still sanctions in place by the EU out of 1999, if I'm not mistaken, that were then put into place by the European Union because of the disappearance of two, actually four people who never reappeared ever. And one was the former head of the Central Electoral Commission, Mr. Gonchar. So that was in if I remember very well, in '99. And the sanctions are that there is an embargo on arms exports to Belarus by the European Union and on all equipment that could be used for oppressive measures against civilian against civilians. Then some additional sanctions were put into place against individuals, but they were then lifted if I'm not mistaken, in 2016. So sanctions with Belarus from the EU side could be a possibility if it is targeted sanctions against some certain individuals. But unlike Russia, in Belarus, there are no oligarchs. And so you can have sanctions against certain individuals, also freezing their assets. But I don't think that these individuals, whoever they are, will be really in a difficult situation afterwards. So one has to look at this very soberly. The last step by the EU in favor of Belarus was to ease visas for Belarus citizens. But this is not a visa-free arrangement, by far not as it is in place with Ukraine, between EU and Ukraine. It is just that the Belarus citizens of Belarus will pay the same price for multi-entry visas, the same fee as Russians, and nothing else. So if one takes back this measure, it would hit exactly those people who might, from my point of view, have been behind the candidates which have been in favor of more openness of Belarus. So one has to be, as I said, sober as to what can the European Union do, because the relationship with Belarus is in reality a non-relationship. There is one other aspect, that is Belarus, if I'm not mistaken, wants to join WTO. But also there, Russia might have also its say on the conditions for Belarus entry into WTO. Now, let's turn to a possible US reaction. Very difficult for me to say. I guess the US will criticize the way the elections were held. But whether they would like to impose sanctions or not, let's see. Pompeo had visited Belarus in the beginning, I think in February of this year, or was it the end of January, beginning of February. And he was very much advocating oil deliveries, American oil deliveries to Belarus. And he also promised that an ambassador will be sent to Belarus, and indeed the lady is already appointed. Whether she's already there or not, I really don't know. What the US might be doing in this is certainly a question. There will be a question mark. And it will be interesting to follow also the US reaction.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your take on the situation in Belarus right now. Do you have anything to add that you would like to add?
You're very welcome. Well, I think what is really interesting for all close observers of the development in, and I think one has to add the world around Belarus, is what will be the development of the relationship between Belarus and Russia. And what will happen in the days, weeks to come. There is still this open case of the 33 or 32 fighters of Wagner detained in Belarus. One really has to ask oneself, why did they end up in Belarus just before the elections? What did they have to do there? And is that a truly believable story that they were in simple transit? One has to ask oneself, why among these people are snipers who had been active in the Donbass exactly at the time when there is a ceasefire in the Donbass? You see snipers who had been active in the Donbass before suddenly show up in Belarus. So it is an interesting situation. In all my years, and I would say decades, that I have been observing the post-Soviet world, I have only learned one thing, that one should never use the term coincidence.
All right. Well, I think that's a good word to end this interview with. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.